All right, welcome back. One final time. So here we are. We just left off last time with the with 4.1. So we're going to try to do 4.2 and 4.3 today. Starts at the very beginning. So 4.2 is although the world's productive systems continue to be heavily centered on agriculture, major changes occurred in labor, and the systems and locations of manufacturing, gender and social structures, and environmental problems. So the first part, right, is just talking about the Little Ice Age, connecting to disease of Black Death. There's a ton in here right there that kind of summarizes a lot of this. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but we talked about the Little Ice Age last time, right? And we were saying, just not to go back into it, but the Little Ice Age is not in the early Middle Ages, right? There was a dip in temperature during the early Middle Ages. There was a medieval warm period during the high to late Middle Ages, and then it dipped down again after the Black Death, or during around that time of the Black Death, and into the period of European colonization of the Americas. So this is a question here. I'm not going to go into right now, but I think you guys can use it as a practice question. So let's jump ahead to traditional peasant agriculture increased and changed. Plantations expanded, demand for labor increased. These changes both fed and responded to growing global demand for raw materials and finished products. So obviously the fact that the Americas have been discovered, right, that's shifting everything, and there's a greater demand. You guys did I think a good example of some of these issues, which is, I guess, referenced here with the Qing Dynasty, is the DBQ essay you guys did over the summer on silver. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And just incredible how European exploration in the Americas, the changes in the Spanish with silver, that massive amounts of silver that's decreasing, the way that affects a peasant farmer in China, right? You think, oh, that has nothing to do with me, that has to do with Spain and Mexico, and I don't even have anything really to do with silver. But that farmer in China is going to be affected by that, right? Do you guys remember what that conversation was about?
They had like too much silver, right? It was like becoming a problem.
So there was changes in the amount of silver, and the changes in the demand for it, right? Because the availability of silver increases,
the price drops.
The value drops, and then there's also an expectation that everything's going to be paid for in silver, right? So within China, the Europeans are coming; they're spending silver in China. What was that kind of money that China actually had? Yeah, they had paper money. I think they did away with it before this, but this is even more so. They're going to be using coins again, which seems like going backwards. But hey, if you have the silver, right, you might as well use it. But that doesn't work that works for people at the top of society, perhaps. Maybe they're benefiting from it. But for the average farmer, like, I don't have any silver. I have crops, you know. That changes the way that they're going to be able to engage with the economy. I'm trying to remember some of the specific documents, but I know that there was less food being available because people weren't planting food because they weren't able to make enough money in planting food to earn enough silver to pay what they needed to pay in like taxes and in rents for the land. So people said, well, I'm just going to give up with farming because I can't make it with farming. I can't produce enough to survive with farming. We're being overtaxed because the expectations are now higher in terms of what the government wants, and I'm going to give up farming. So there was plenty of food and plenty of land to farm it on. The land was fertile, but nobody wanted to get into the farming business, right? That's what they say. What was it? Coffee or something like that, or chocolate. One of the commodities, one of the big things that are a big part of our world. They're saying we got to make sure that it doesn't disappear, not because it's going to die or anything, but if it's not profitable to produce a certain good, no one will do that, and we won't have it, right? It's kind of weird, like, economic things that we don't think about. That goods are produced based on demand and profitability. When we talk about even in period 5 and going to period 6, we were talking about like the IMF today and some of loans and things like that, people would be pressured. And then, in the Green Revolution, right? There was a pressure to grow cash crops. You'll make money from that. Like, cool, we need to eat. Can't eat, cotton, or you can't eat other cash crop. Well, that's what you're going to need to pay back your loans, right? We're jumping ahead, but similar kind of ideas that some of these big changes in money are going to still trickle down to the lives of peasants. It's not all negative, but we can look at some examples. Mughal Empire, cotton is a huge industry. They're going to struggle to compete with cotton that's being grown in the Americas, right? Because India was like the big cotton center. Like three areas of the world you can think of with cotton: India, the American South, and Egypt. But India was probably number one during the Indian Ocean Trade Network, right? From period 3, textile production was the big thing that India was doing, right? They were doing a lot of trading of other people's things, from Africa to Southeast Asia. But their big product was cotton. The demand for cotton is going to increase. They're going to be expected to produce more cotton. We just mentioned the Qing dynasty. Russian Empire, I wanted to just point this out because I don't know if this is exactly what they're looking for in this particular case in terms of the labor, but one thing I can say is that Russia held on to serfdom for a really long time. Even though serfdom kind of faded out in Western Europe, Russia, kind of having been, even going back to the Mongol times, kind of always a little bit cut off from the rest of Europe. They maintained serfdom, they kind of continue that lifestyle. But just in general, when you talk about the Russian Empire, I think it's a topic that often gets overlooked. And that is just to recognize, like, what is or isn't Russia. I think in a very similar way to the way that America is an empire, and we very rarely think about it in that way. Like, America had to be conquered, right? It started as 13 colonies. The beginning of the nation, the state of America. But then it expanded west and continued to conquer more and more places from people who previously lived there. And now we look at the map of America, and that shape is so familiar to us. We're looking at the map over there in green. It's so familiar to us, it almost seems like, that's just America. It's just the way it is. It's the way it was meant to be. American history, we talk about manifest destiny, right? And I think we said in class, how different is manifest destiny from, the white man's burden and some of these other concepts that we talk about when we talk about non-American history. Same idea, right? This idea that we're somehow entitled to being able to control this territory. And Russia is really similar kind of a story because, again, we look at the map, we see Russia, and go, yeah, this whole thing is Russia. What else would it be? But what was this? What is all this area? Thank you. Like, what kind of people lived in this neighborhood? Yeah, a lot of nomadic. So they're easy to forget, right? People don't care about it. They're not civilized according to that biased view of civilization. But yeah, like the Mongols are from Mongolia is down here, but this region, Mongols and Mongolic and Turkic peoples live throughout this region down here in Central Asia. We have all these different peoples, but today it's just Russia, right? This is Kazakhstan now. But this whole region is Russia, and for a long time this was part of the Russian Empire, and then later it was part of the Soviet Union, right? You see this 1796 to 1947. These areas that are no longer part of the Soviet Union, this part is part of Russia, but it was part of the Soviet Union. You can see how much they expanded, and Russia started out. Really, Russian civilization started out in Kiev, but Kiev is actually part of Ukraine today. The current Russian state, right, has its origins in Moscow, post-Mongol, the Muscovite Russians, and they expanded from there to St. Petersburg. Ultimately, they did conquer Ukraine, and then spreading out deep into Siberia. You had people who were less able to be with them, and especially with the new technology that's coming out with gunpowder weapons, things like that. But man, like, this is just Russia now, so it's something similar to the United States in that way. And the fact that they did colonize and imperialize people and Russify people, right? Kind of bring them culturally into Russian identity. And even though there are many different ethnicities within Russia, many people have been Russianized or Russified, right? To see themselves as being Russian, whether their ancestors are Turks or Finno-Ugric people or Slavic people or others that lived in that region historically. I think it's interesting and worth noting. Continuation of slavery. Obviously we know this in the case of the Americas. Slavery plays a major role. The incorporation of female slaves into households, export of slaves to the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean. So just because slavery is happening in the Americas, there's still a slave trade that takes place in the Indian Ocean world, particularly in East Africa, and elsewhere in the region. The growth of plantation economy and the demand for slaves in the Americas, that's obviously the bigger issue with slavery. So we have a few different types of slavery being mentioned here, or unfree labor. Chattel slavery, indentured servitude, encomienda system. Is there anything on this side? Yep. No. So, chattel slavery, the word chattel means property, right? Chattel property and real property, real estate, like land, right? So that was considered real property, and chattel property was like that, those things that you could carry with you, right? Not like property like land, but something I own. I own a blender, I don't know, whatever, right? That's chattel. So chattel slavery was the kind of slavery where people are enslaved, but they are treated like absolute property, right? And there were forms of slavery throughout history, I was just talking about this in my 9th grade class, no forms of slavery are good, right? But some are even worse. And the slavery that we see happening in the Americas during this period is just so extreme, such an extreme form of slavery. For instance, in Africa, in the Middle East, and other parts of the world, in many societies, to varying degrees, there was a sense that, yes, slavery is a part of society, but you shouldn't treat your slaves poorly. You should still treat your slaves well. A good, moral person may have a slave, but they would treat them with respect. Now, I'm not advocating this, of course, but that was the perception in many societies. In fact, in some societies, people could be slaves and become free. In the Muslim world, like in the Mamluk Egypt, the slaves rose up and became the rulers, but not because they were slaves in the way that chattel slavery took place in the Americas, but they were having roles in government as slaves, right? A closely related thing is the Devshirme system with the Janissaries in the Turkish Empire, in the Ottoman Empire, right? That idea that you are enslaved, but like you have chances, you have opportunities. You could buy your freedom. You could earn your freedom. Your children would not necessarily be enslaved, right? Very often, children of slaves would be born free, especially if one of the parents was free. In the Americas, it was very extreme, right? Chattel slavery. You absolutely are property. We've seen pictures of people being packed into ships, right? Absolutely awful. And the issue with the way that compares to other forms of servitude, right? We talk about encomienda, or we talk about indentured servitude. These are also not good systems, but it's technically not slavery. And some people would say, what's the difference? If it's technically not slavery in name, but you're basically treated like a slave, isn't that the same, right? Encomienda, you have no. If you guys maybe remember last year, we read. That's what in the Mita system. It was in Peru, in the Inca, and in Peru they kept the Mita system and used that as a form of enforced labor. Encomienda was more in Mexico and some of the other Spanish colonies where there wasn't a pre-existing system that was in place under the Aztecs for corvée labor. So they introduced this system, encomienda. So what encomienda actually was, it was almost like serfdom, but it was, the reason it's called encomienda, I think it comes from the same root of like, commandeering a vehicle, right? You take it over, you have a right to take that. So these encomiendas were, the government of Spain wants to colonize the place, right? They want their people there, because if you claim a territory, we put our flag on the moon, but we're not doing anything with it, right? Technically, America, we've claimed the moon. People claim Antarctica, but then it's Antarctica. There's not a lot going on there. If global warming melts all the ice and then there's tons of oil, we're going to see massive wars over Antarctica, right? But everybody claimed their little piece of the orange slice. They're going to go crazy for it. It's already, I think, probably starting. But when you colonize a place, you got to get people there. So the Spanish wanted to put their people in the colony, and you have to give them a reason. Why should I leave Spain and move to other side of the world where I don't know anything and I have nothing? Well, if if you go there, we'll hook you up. We'll give you a spot, and this will be your encomienda. And anybody who lives, any native people who happen to live in the area, they're like boom, instant serfs. Like they now belong to you as your labor. You're guaranteed labor because people live there. And we'll just plop you in the middle. We'll draw a circle around you, and everybody who lives in that circle, they work for you. Right. So it's serfdom, or it's very similar to serfdom, but rather than it like developing on its own, slowly, incrementally, everything about the Columbian Exchange is dramatic. Right. It's quick. Serfdom developed in Europe over the course of the Roman Empire collapse and the Viking invasions leading to militarization and lords and knights and all this stuff. People didn't feel it happening. They didn't go, what's this new thing, serfdom? It just, over generations, it slowly evolved. This is like overnight. Boom, we're implementing this. There's a similar thing. Did we do hacienda? I don't know if it was on there. There's another, maybe it'll come up, but if you want to write it down. Similar to encomiendas, haciendas. Haciendas, Hacienda. They're very similar, except they're just people who own territory. Rather than the government just hooking them up, the people who were aristocrats in the Americas who owned land and basically had serfs, essentially serfs. So it's very similar to encomienda, related systems. Indentured servitude is, well, you guys actually know quite a bit about this, I believe. You guys didn't say on indentured servitude. What's indentured servitude?
They'll usually have like a contract for passage into the Americas where they have to work for like about, the standard was 7 years, but they usually went over that with like back taxes and like O's and debts.
Yeah, once you're in it, you're depending on the person who you work for to tell you you're done. You don't go, technically I'm done, see you later. They're going to say, no. Change my mind, changing the terms of our agreement. They do have the power over you. So it is a form of unfree labor. You're kind of selling yourself into slavery. You're loaning yourself into slavery. We saw in the DBQ essay that you guys did earlier in the year, applied differently in different points in history, right? In the Americas, it wasn't great. And certainly there were people exploited. A couple years ago, there was a big article on the Irish indentured servants or slaves. And there's all controversy of the Irish were slaves and people fighting over the whole thing. But remember that? Yeah. But it was even worse for people in period 5 and going into period 6, right? With people being brought from India and other parts of the non-Western world, and some really extreme situations where they were promised something and they were treated almost as bad as slaves, right? The term coolies, which is not, again, like I said with mestizo and mulatto, not a term you want to throw around, but that was the term that was used for primarily Indian servants who were taken and brought to other parts of the world, or even within the region, to be indentured servants, COOLIES. But again, not something you want to throw around. It'd be a very offensive term. But that issue of, is it slavery? Even though it's almost slavery, it's still not slavery, and it does make a difference, especially in this extreme form of chattel slavery, because as bad as it is to be under encomienda, to be treated like garbage, you still might have a little bit of rights. You still at least have human dignity. You have the recognition that you are a person. But with slavery, some people have described slavery as social death. You are dead to society. You are not a person. You are an object, you are property, and you have absolutely no value or worth as a human being. And we can go back to Hammurabi, right? I put out the eye of a slave, the nobleman put out the eye of a slave, they have the value of the slave to the slave's owner. Nothing for the slave. He is not considered in this, right? Or she is not considered in this. As social and political elites changed, they also restructured ethnic, racial, and gender hierarchies. So we'll jump on a few of these. In particular, the Creoles, I think, are a good... so gentry is probably referring to China, although that term can be applied more broadly to elites, upper-class aristocrats in general. So that's what the word gentry means. It's another word for aristocrats. I think especially in the AP curriculum, you hear it more for China. Urban commercial entrepreneurs. So this is... What's a nice French term we could use for these folks? People who live in the city, in business and trade, trying to get something started.
Bourgeoisie.
Yes, these will become a bourgeoisie, right? And this is the new elites, right? The nouveau riche, right? The new rich. When we get to period 5, these are the people who are pissed off in France that why am I not treated like a noble, right? I should should be a noble. I'm like rich. I'm about these peasants, but hey, man, why don't I get to be treated all special? Screw you guys, right? You're gonna revolt. These are people who, especially from this expansion in, again, the Columbian Exchange and this discovery has really shaken things up very abruptly. There's a lot of new opportunities that didn't exist before. People are going to jump at that. If people get into trade, mercantile business, right? We talk about mercantilism. They're going to make some good money, and they're going to be able to stash that, and they're going to be able to invest that money in businesses. And we saw during going in from 4 to 5, right? One of the big shifts from 4 to 5 is in 4 you have people getting involved in trade and shipping, and we looked at like the Indian Dutch East India Company and fractional shares of ships and things like that, right? The people who earn that money now over a couple generations, those are going to be some of the same people who invest in industry when we have the Industrial Revolution, because they have this nest egg, they have this capital, this money that they can invest, and they go, you know what? Why don't I start a factory? This is what's happening now. Let's get a business. Let's get a building. Let's start producing goods so we can trade them, and then slowly the shift focuses from, yeah, I'll get some goods so I can ship them on my ship and trade them all over, to forget the ship. Let's just focus on the factory side of this, and that becomes the big way to make money, right? Creoles in Spanish America, I really like that those two are put next to each other, because I really think that the Creoles in Spanish America have a nice comparison with the bourgeoisie, which is I'm almost good enough to be considered like the special one. Who was above the Creoles?
The Peninsulares.
Peninsulares, right? And the only thing that's different is what?
They were both white.
Yeah, they're both white. It's supposed to be the most helpful thing. Oh, we have three.
The Peninsulares were born in Spain.
Peninsulares are born in Spain. Creoles are born there. They say, I'm already basically upper class. I'm white, and this is a racist system, so that's supposed to mean something for me. And why can't I have everything? So when we see like revolutions taking place in the next period, in period 5, those people tend to be the leaders of the revolutions. The ones who actually take charge tend to be the Creoles, because they are almost as powerful as the Peninsulares. And remember, the Peninsulares are in Spain. There are people obviously who they wouldn't have a category for it if there weren't people in the Americas that were born there. But as time goes on, more and more of the fully European population are going to be Creoles and not Peninsulares, right? In the beginning, it's like mostly Peninsulares. Then you go a generation forward, it's half and half. Then you go another generation, it's 2/3. And as time goes on, there's not that many Peninsulares there to kind of stand up for their position. The Creoles want to be in charge, and they're obviously, with a lot of racist systems, racialized societies, the United States included. If you're not at the top, but you're somewhere else in the middle there, like, you're gonna look down on the person under you, like, hey, at least I'm not whatever this group is. I'm here, and let me I'm not that far from this one, so let me try to be as close to the one above me as possible, right? If race is the basis for social advancement and social worth, then that's what people are gonna try to do, and sometimes that's by kicking the people at the bottom of it, right? So sometimes some of the most racist people can be the people who are not at the very top, but in the middle, and trying to prove themselves, right? And we're getting off track with that. Here we are, the Creoles, right? Okay, look at that, gentry. So this was, I was thinking about it in the context of China, but the second estate, the nobles of high social standing. So they're kind of comparing this with, So I think one of the changes that we see here, coming out of period 3, with the gentry or the aristocrats or elites or the nobles, whatever term you want to term them, is that it's not so much about feudalism anymore. Back in the day, it was really connected to I own land, I am powerful because I have serfs, they farm my land for me, and that's the basis of my power. As time goes on, and that is no longer really that big of a deal anymore, at least not the only way to get ahead, this becomes more symbolic, right? This becomes more formal, and so it's not really like I'm the lord in a castle with a bunch of peasants, but it's my ancestors were, and therefore I'm important, and I'm more better than you, right? And that's why we see during this period, I think we're going to touch on that. People like Louis and Peter the Great trying to say like, these guys don't really do anything anymore. Can we like make that work for our own benefit? Can we kind of like pivot them to a new kind of a role where they don't actually have a ton of power, right? Because they don't really deserve it. They're just hanging out at the top with high noble standing, right? And then by period 5, these guys are going to be powerful enough. And again, this is not specific to Europe, right? But this is all over the world because trade changes and grows. This is globally in all port cities. Entrepreneurs will great social status and power. It's not a new concept, right? This has been true every time there's been urbanization, right? There's an opportunity for more job specialization, and people can advance and have some economic power, right? Power is power. That's one thing we always have to remember, right? The Pope is not a political leader. He's a religious leader, right? But he has religious power, and religious power is political power. All power is political power. Because if the Pope can say, we're going on crusade, all the knights of all Europe from all the different kingdoms, let's go, and they go, the Pope just showed all the kings that he could tell their knights what to do. So that's political power. Economic power, oh, you're technically not a noble, so you're not powerful. Cool, I have a lot of money. I'm gonna do whatever I want. That's political power. Money gives you political power, right? The Manchus is the only one we didn't talk about. So the Manchu Empire is the Qing Empire. I make a connection to the Mongols with the Yuan Dynasty because this is another time period along with the Yuan Dynasty under the Mongols that China is ruled by a non-ethnically Chinese people, right? The Han Chinese, right? I know we have the Han Empire, but the term Han, especially after the Han Empire, was used to describe the majority mainstream ethnic group within China. And I think that even that ethnic group grew as more people kind of became absorbed into Han China, Han identity. Again, it's not the dynasty, it's the native Chinese ethnic group. There are many ethnic minorities within China even today, but the main one is Han. And the Manchus came from the north, up that area where, it's Russia. Well, actually, by this point, I think it was still part of China. If you look on that map of China, you see that part that sticks up into the northeast, kind of awkwardly around Mongolia. That's Manchuria, to the north of Korea. So, actually, you can probably just throw it on here, this area right here. So that's where the Manchus came from. Came down. That wall didn't do anything. What a waste. And one of the kind of visuals you can cling on to. Is that a picture of it? I thought I had one. Is the big braids. Have you guys seen that? Long braids. So the Manchus had a hairstyle where they had shaved part of their head and then they had a long, circle of hair like this and a long braid down the back, right? I think I have a picture of it. I'll throw it in here. Because it's a great visual to think of. So if you look at depictions of Chinese, especially during that time period, late period 5, early period 6, very before the end of the Qing dynasty, very often, especially in caricatured or political cartoons, you'll see that long braid as a represent. That was what people associated with Chinese people. Ironically, it was not actually a Chinese thing; it was a Manchurian thing. Actually, no, I have the picture of it. I just pulled it up before. Muammar Gaddafi, what are you doing out here, man? That's Louis. Oh wait, I already had it in there. There he is. It was a head for some reason. Yeah, it's a long braid. And they forced the Han to grow them. And then when, later on, when the Manchus were kicked out, they forced them to cut it. But they were also the elites, the rulers now of China. Power of existing political and economic elites fluctuated as they confronted new challenges to their ability to affect the policies of increasingly powerful monarchs and leaders. This is what I was just talking about, right? European nobles. It's the same as the gentries, but just the context is different. Where are we going? Yeah, I guess we don't need a special thing for it, but the boyars are just the Russian nobles, and that's who Peter the Great was dealing with. So they're trying to, they really don't have the power they used to have, and monarchs are trying to increase their power. These absolute monarchs, right? So if you write down under B, in the space on the left, absolute monarchy. It's not specific to Europe, right? Some of the big famous ones we know are Louis, perhaps with European nobles, that's the most obvious one to think of. What did he do to control his nobles?
He moved them all into Versailles and took all their land.
Exactly right. Hey, I'm gonna let you live in this beautiful mansion, everything you need. The king was like, yo, it's worth the money to protect my power. I'm gonna win-win. I think that was pretty smart. He put this palace together, made it so luxurious and wonderful. And remember, we did the game where you guys were following around. Right? It's a cult of personality, right? Totally cult of personality, big time. And especially in a way where he has them all in his house, so he doesn't even have to like get out on the media and put this cult of personality to the whole country. He just needs to do it within his household because they're all there. All the nobles are there, and he just builds it locally. This obsession around him, the Sun King, right? L'état c'est moi. I am the state. And so those nobles now go from being, they still have prestige, they still have fancy title, and certainly the legal benefits of that, like at least by the time of the French Revolution, they didn't have to pay taxes, things like that. But their actual like military, political power and threat is kind of neutralized by doing that, by bringing them all in and taking them, literally removing them from their lands, but almost voluntarily. Peter the Great, there's one of the DBQs I gave you last year. I think I pulled it from an old Regents, but I loved it. What they did was he said, I'm not going to take away your nobility. Because what would he say? You're not nobles. We cancel your nobility. What are they going to do?
They're gonna like overthrow him.
Yeah, they're going to flip out. They're going to overthrow him, right? So you got to be low key about it. I think Louis was good. Peter the Great in Russia with the Russian boyars, he said, no, you can be nobles. I'm not going to take that away from you. But I'm going to change what it means to be a noble. And to be a noble, we're going to like kind of reinvent the idea of nobility in our society. And to be a noble means you're particularly chosen. You know, you were born to serve Russia. So either in a military or a political role, you should be working in government, or you should be serving in the military. And you know, that's not meritocratic, right? They might not be the best generals or the best bureaucrats, but you're giving them something. But you're also saying you can't just do nothing and be a noble. You have to be doing something. You have to be contributing. Otherwise, what kind of a noble are you? And they kind of set everybody back to zero, because that was the way that you proved how great of a noble you would be. Or your value as a noble, or the level of your nobility, was tied to the amount that you contributed to the society. And to make it even worse and sting even more, common people can get all the same benefits of nobility by, I mean, they don't have quite the leg up, but they can get involved in the military, they get involved in government, and they can also do the same job. So it's kind of like, wait, I thought that was what we do. We're the nobles. And like, yeah, but you know, they can do it too. Like, cool, but then what makes us nobles? Like, what is the difference between us and them? Kind of nothing, right? And that's the point. You get rid of you neutralize the nobles, not by telling them they can't be nobles, but by making that not really mean anything anymore. The zamindars in India, in the Mughal Empire, these were basically similar kind of thing. They were lords, right? It's really similar because humans do kind of the same type of stuff everywhere. And they owned land. They had peasants. They collected taxes from them. This is straight off Wikipedia, but I liked it because it actually does a really nice job summing it up. But you got to keep them happy. Remember Akbar, right? The leader he was the third and the most famous Mughal ruler. He is what religion? Well, ostensibly what religion? And the Mughals in general.
Hindu?
No, not Hindu. Mughal, Babur, Akbar, Shah Jahan. No, it's Zoroastrian. The Mughal Empire. It's one of the three gunpowder empires. The Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. They replaced the Delhi Sultanates in northern India, took over the whole shebang for themselves. The name Akbar doesn't clue you in enough? They built the Taj Mahal. Yeah, they're Muslim, right? Review your Mughals, guys. Review your Mughals. Go watch. John Green has a nice video comparing Akbar and Aurangzeb. Give some stuff on the Mughals. I'm happy to tell you anything about the Mughals you want to know. Go back to your textbook, read about them. You should know the Mughals. I think that the AP tends to like things with the Mughals. I've seen them throw that on there before. A lot of imagey stuff where they're like, here's an image, but you know about the Mughals, so I don't have to tell you anything else. It's like, especially in relation to, because the British take over, right? So the Mughals are relevant in this period when it comes to the idea of, a lot. I mean, absolute monarchy, religious syncretism through Akbar, and then later when it comes to the British, the conflict as the British begin taking over the Mughals, and that in between period is like the stuff that usually gets brushed over. Stuff to the AP's like, haha, that's where we're gonna get you. We're gonna assume you skipped that and just jumped to the British and weren't paying attention to the transitional period. So I've seen them do that like between 4 and 5 Mughali stuff. But when it comes to this case, so they're a Muslim ruling group, but they're ruling over a region that's predominantly Hindu, right? So that's tough. Like, you got to make a case for yourself. They're not Hindu. They're not Indian. They're the Mughals. What does Mughal mean? It's the Persian word. It comes from the Persian word Mughals. Mughals. And you guess what it could be? The Persians called them the Mughals. They're really the the Mongols. Yeah. So the Mughals are not technically Mongols. They're a little bit Mongols. They're mostly Turks. They're Turkic peoples from Central Asia, not Turkey, right? Remember that's its own thing. But the Turks are from Central Asia originally, and they're descendant. Babur was descendant from apparently Genghis Khan, but who isn't, right? And also Tamerlane, who was connected with the Chagatai Khanate. So they have some Mongol ancestry, Turkic ancestry. They're the ones who take over northern India. The Delhi Sultanate, if you want to put this in the margin, this doesn't really have anything to do with this, but since you guys don't know, we're a bit confused about the Mughals, and you're the people who are here today, I'm tailoring this to you. So anybody watching at home should show it up. The Delhi Sultanate ruled northern India for 300-400 years before the Mughals. 1200s-ish, 1300s, 1400s. And the Mughals come in, the date escapes me, but like the late 1500s? 1600s is really when we think of the Mughals. But the Delhi Sultanates did not have strong power in northern India. And they only really controlled northern India. And there were sultanates. There were 4 different ones, big ones. And they were mostly Turkic and Afghan. So now when the Mughals come in, what makes them different? What technology do they have? I already said it before, but the Mughals come in, the thing that enables them to really conquer India effectively.
Their horses and bows.
Huh? Horses and bows? No, they got rid of that. Done with those. They got something better than that. Gunpowder, yeah. One of the 3 gunpowder empires, so it's probably gunpowder, right? Along with the Ottomans and Safavids. Safavids took over what region? What's the Safavid Empire? Where's that at?
Persia?
Persia, yeah. They're the ones who introduced Shia Islam to Persia. So we're talking about Iran, all this stuff, Shia Islam. They hooked it up. Before that, it was predominantly Sunni in Iran. And they're the ones who brought it in. And then Ottoman Empire, of course, was Turkey and the Arab Middle East and North Africa eventually. But in India, they have to please the local rulers. So one of the famous things Akbar did was he married a Hindu Rajput princess, right, from this special caste and this particular group that was seen as highly respected and highly elite within Hindu society, Indian society. But in this particular example, what they're referencing here are these zamindars, which were landowners, lords. That's what they were, and they give them. So they're part of the nobility, essentially, right? Akbar gives them, kind of validates their rule. I'm not going to challenge you too much because I'm not trying to have you guys try to overthrow me, so I'll accept you as rulers. It's worth mentioning, though, that later on under the British, they also maintained, and even to the point of partition, even to the 40s, the 1940s, there were still parts of India, big chunks of India, that were not ruled, that were still under British rule, but there was a local king or a local Maharaja, Raja, Nawabs. If you guys seen Aladdin, he goes, I'm on the job, you big Nabob. And Nabob was a mispronunciation of Nawab, which is this term for these Indian princes. And even like princely states within India, princely state. It was a predominantly Muslim region, but ruled by a Hindu prince, and so that was part of their conflict, right? So that continued on, going into even in that period. Notable gender and family restructuring occurred, including demographic changes in Africa resulting from the slave trades. This is not the right thing. This is for the next thing. So I'm not going to say too much about this one. We'll kind of just breeze through this, but in particular Africa, I mean, I think it's really worth mentioning that, Africa is not unaffected by the slave trade. We focus so much, I think we talked a lot about it last year, but very often when people talk about the slave trade, they focus on the Middle Passage, right? The journey of enslaved Africans coming to the Americas, the treatment of people who are enslaved, and more and more they're talking about the role that African states played in the slave trade. But we gotta think, like, you took so many people from this continent, massive amounts, and again, the abruptness, the extreme nature of the Columbian Exchange and its results. Everything's happening so quickly and so fast, and at such great, tremendous levels. Imagine the social impact that the loss of that many people is going to have to African society, right? I mean, we can kind of assume what that result is. The conflict that takes place because wars increase in Africa, in West Africa, because people are either trying to gain prisoners of war to sell as slaves or trying to defend themselves from other states that are trying to have prisoners of war to gain as slaves. And we even talked about today, like, hey, if you're from a group that does not want to sell slaves, but you're being attacked by another group that does sell slaves and therefore buys what from the Europeans to help fight? Not quite machine guns yet, not period 4, that's period 5. But muskets and early guns and stuff like that, like, they're obviously going to beat you, so you have two options: get killed, or maybe sell a couple slaves, get a few guns, or it's incredibly damaging. It's tearing the region apart, through war, through the loss of the human potential. Just how many people that could have been, scholars and doctors and are going to be sold into slavery. I mean, many of the people who were sold into slavery were scholars. There's a thing that just came recently I saw. I mentioned to you guys last year. We had a little worksheet about, I believe his name is Omar bin Said, who was a Senegalese guy, who was an Islamic scholar. He was an expert. He was like a professor, and this is somebody who's being taken as a slave, right? And he was writing, and he wrote, I think, a biography and like some religious texts, not like just like a little poem or a little, like, he was writing books while being a slave. Incredible, and the way that they treated slaves, to think that they were, inferior and everything like that. Like, the guy's writing scholarship from memory while he's in another part of the world and taken as a slave. It's just incredible. But the loss of those people to Africa, right, is going to be something that we can't really calculate, but we can only just imagine what kind of a loss that would be. Let's jump to period 4.3 because we're short on time, so I want to make sure we hit everything we can today. So rulers use a variety of methods to legitimize and consolidate their rule. So some of these we connect with what we were saying before about Louis and Peter and Akbar and others. This is a period of absolutism. We're seeing rulers around the world really starting to push back on the power of local rulers, lords, things like that, and raise themselves up to a much greater control. Of course, in period 5, we'll see this kind of start toppling with the revolutions in Europe and then elsewhere. In the Safavid Empire, which we just mentioned, which was one of the 3 gunpowder empires, Shi'ism, right? Look at that. That becomes, there's a forced conversion, unfortunately, at least in some cases, to Shia Islam, or it's at least pushed on the people heavily. And when you look at the comparison between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam, one possible reason why, as a ruler, if you completely care less about religion, just politically thinking, Shia Islam might be a little bit more effective as something to, if he was like, okay, I want to be a ruler, I want to maintain my power. Do I want to rule in a Sunni population or a Shia population? The Shia theology and stuff is more associated with like leadership, particularly, at least in the case of somebody who has descent from Prophet Muhammad, right? Although, to be fair, the Shia tradition also is quite critical of rulers who are tyrannical, right? We saw like the Umayyads who killed the Prophet's grandson, who's supposed to be the next caliph, right? Hussein. they're going to try to use that religion to validate their position, right? If we get everybody on the same page with Shia Islam, the ruler is the leader of that society, and also can make connections themselves to the imams. We saw even Ayatollah Khomeini, and that's obviously a modern thing, but there's similar idea there that the person who's running the country ought to be, or the government should be based on religion. And that's not to say that's not the case with Sunni Islam as well. But a lot of the Sunni Muslim states we see like a role of the ulama. You guys remember that term, ulama? I don't know why they just always want to translate everything into other languages. Just say what it means. But they want you to have all these terms. The ulama, usually spelled U-L-E-M-A, and this is not specific to Shia Islam, but just in general, in terms of Islam and government, is the scholars. So in a way, I would compare it to with the Supreme Court, and we see that actually in the Iranian system today. This idea of instead of a Supreme Court to tell you what is or is not constitutional, the Constitution is what? What's essentially the Constitution in an Islamic government, theological government?
The Quran.
The Quran, right? So instead of having constitutional scholars who are judges at the Supreme Court, you have religious scholars who are experts on the Quran, and they can tell you if you're ruling in a way that's appropriate. Now, you look at somebody like Akbar. I don't want to go too much off. Is this partly related to this? No? Well, it's part of the same idea like divine right. Akbar, he got rid of Islam. Even though he was Muslim, he developed his own religion. You guys remember that? Mughals. That's not really related to this, but it's still part of this overall thing if you stick it on the side. He created a religion called Dina Ilahi, which means the divine faith, or divine religion. And you can look at it from, if you watch a John Green video, he talks about how people gush over Akbar in a modern sense because he did a lot of things that seem very Western, liberal, tolerant, things like that, which he did. But we can look at a more self-serving motive by getting rid of Islam officially as Orthodox faith and saying instead we're going to use this syncretic faith of Dina Ilahi, which blends in Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism and other things. The ulama have no role anymore because they're experts on Islam, but Islam is not the religion anymore. So your voice is worthless. And now that's basically getting rid of the Supreme Court, right? If the president gets rid of the Supreme Court, that's not a check on his power, right? And now he has more absolute rule. So by changing the religion from Islam, he's getting rid of the value and the purpose of the ulama. That's another way that during this period, monarchs, it's not on here, but it's an example of that. Monarchs are going to use religion or use these things to consolidate their power. Divine right in general, that the ruler was placed where they are by God and no one else should be able to tell them what to do, whether that's the parliament or nobles or, in Akbar's case, even the religious scholars. Right? If God didn't want me to be the ruler, he wouldn't have put me in place. Why are you trying to say I don't know what I'm doing? We see this obviously with Louis, with James I, James Stuart, the King of England. That kind of led us into the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution, which eventually leads to limited monarchy in England. In the Aztec Empire, you were responsible to, if you remember when the Spanish came to the Americas, one of the ways that the Aztecs were defeated was by the Spanish allying with other people within the Aztec Empire that didn't like the Aztecs, would rather have not been part of their empire. And one of the reasons was they had to pay tribute, right, through sacrifice. And one of the techniques, though, of this is similar to what we talk about with slavery. If you're going to send sacrifices, they have to, you'd rather not send your own people, so who would you rather send? Someone else's people, and how do you get someone else's people?
Tracking them.
Yeah.
And what are the people that you take? POWs. It's just like we're talking about slavery, right? That the people who are taken as slaves were POWs, and so you're going to have people fighting each other for captives. And according to this, at least, it's saying that the one of the logic behind it from a ruling perspective, which obviously wasn't totally effective, but fighting each other to get captives, that they won't be fighting us. In Songhai Empire, you guys remember Songhai? We barely talk about it. We talk about it in the context of two other empires with it. What are those? Blank, blank, and Songhai. Three empires in the same, more or less the same place. Timbuktu.
Mom?
Yeah, Mali is the famous one, right? So it's Ghana, Mali, and then Songhai. From Ghana to Mali to Songhai, it's getting more and more Islamic or Islamized, right? Ghana, the rulers adopted Islam, more like a prestige thing, like, oh, this is a cool religion that's like up and coming, we're going to be Muslim, and we're not going to take it too seriously. And most of the people were still practicing pre-Islamic religion in West Africa. And during Mali, you guys know who's the famous king?
He's the one that went around with like
He with the gold, right?
Yeah, he's got all the gold, richest man that ever lived. His name means King Moses. Not sure if that helps.
Mansa Musa?
Mansa Musa, that's the one. Now that was again period 3, late period 3, 1300s. And he was obviously Muslim, as you know. He traveled to Mecca for the Hajj, brought back Islamic scholars, built up Timbuktu. But by the Songhai Empire, it's gotten even more Islamic, and they are, the people have become more Muslim. Even when Ibn Battuta went there, he was surprised at how religious people were going to mosque. But then they were also. Do you remember?
They were like naked.
Yeah, it was like the women were naked when you went to the king's quarters. So they was in a transition phase. They were learning. By Songhai though, they're pretty like solidly Islamic, and so Islam becomes part of the rulers' tactic of just like the other religions, using that as a justification for their rule. You should obey me. You shouldn't be rebellious, and obey the king. Confucianism. Right, the Manchus. We saw this under the Yuan dynasty in China, right, under the Mongols. In the same way, hey, you want to run China? You better get on board with Confucianism. You better get on board with some Chinese practices. So hey, I know I'm Manchu. I might not be Han Chinese, but you guys know all about Confucianism. I don't got to tell you about obeying your ruler, right? Confucius has been telling you that for a long time. So let's just keep that going. That seems to be working. No reason to change it, right? Art and architecture are used to legitimize rule. This often gets overlooked, but you build a big thing, and you go, look what I made. Huh? Pretty cool. Let's keep me in power. Right? Great Wall of China. I mean, this is going back. But, there are there are rulers today that would like to build big things that they can point at and say, look what I did. Won't name any names. But these are a big deal. I mean, this was the one we already talked about, right? Versailles. And that obviously has more than just architectural significance. But things like the Taj Mahal under the Mughal Empire, under Shah Jahan, it's not just he loves his wife. Sure, he loves his wife, but he built it as 13, 14 kids she had, right? And then died in childbirth. So maybe there's a little guilt involved there, but he built this, and to build something like this, a lot of tax money goes into this. But people then will look at it, and it's there. Oh my goodness, wow, the power, the might. Going back, I honestly, I know that they're talking about it with this period, but I always associate it with period 2. 2 examples. One is Athens, when they build the Parthenon after the Persian Wars, and it's a symbol to the rest of the city-states. Remember the Delian League and how they had that empire that they established to say, we don't mess with us, but also to almost be like a tribute to those who died, because the Parthenon was built as a tribute to those who died. I compared it last year to Freedom Tower, right? There was actually a temple there that was destroyed by the Persians, and in its place, or right next to it, they left the ruins of their old temple, Athena Polias, and they built next to it this Parthenon. We are great. It was go Athens, go Greece. We are the heroes of Greece. We are the leaders of Greece, and also to be intimidating. So it's both a patriotic kind of symbol, nationalistic, maybe it's anachronistic to use that term, but to build that patriotism among the Greeks who visit, but then also to go, these people have a lot of money. They are powerful. They built this whole thing. I'm not trying to mess with them. If they can build that, if they can waste all their tax dollars on this, they won't have a problem wasting their tax dollars to go to war with me or something, right? And the other one is the Romans, Augustus, the ultimate great example of pre-modern absolute ruler. He was his last words, or his official last words, that were not apparently his real last words, were something along the lines of, "I found Rome a city of brick, and I left it clothed in marble." Right? Building projects right away. Let me show you something you can see. Right? People don't understand the details. So we talked about Copernicus last time, right? Trying to do everything with math. Galileo's got the telescope. Look with your eyes, you can see it, and that's all you need to know. People like things they can see, that they're reminded of constantly. So a big building, big shiny place, big palace, big temple, big forum, theater. These are the things that really people see on a regular basis that connect them with that leader. Ottoman miniatures. I'm not going to get into the whole thing. They're awesome. Miniature painting in general. We saw it at the Met last time. Did I talk about that last? We talked about it a little bit. And the Qing imperial portraits. The idea of showing the image of the family. Again, it even goes back to Augustus. He put up statues of him and his family in Rome, just to make everybody go, look, but Daddy, that's the emperor, right? And just to kind of, because that part of that cult of personality, right? Or maybe again, a little anachronistic, a little early to be using that term, but it's essentially what you're doing, right? Trying to give people something to focus on for your rule. Did we talk about this whole thing last time? Creoles and mestizos and mulattoes and no, maybe I'm mixing up with my anachronism. So this is quick but valuable. Where are we on here? Qing portraits. Alright, I don't see it on there, so we're going to skip it. We're going to go with the paper. So many states adopted practices to accommodate different ethnic and religious diversity of their subjects. Ottomans and the non-Muslim subjects. So Ottomans were very tolerant towards non-Muslims. They had the millet system, M-I-L-L-E-T. So if you were Jewish or you're a Christian, you were obviously under Ottoman rule. You had to obey the law of the empire, but within your community, it was like you do your own thing. If something's going on within the Christian community, if something's going on in the Jewish community, you have your own law, your own system for dealing with that. As long, if a Jewish person robs a Jewish person, they can take that to the Jewish court, right? If a Jewish person robs a Muslim person, okay, maybe now we got to go to the Ottoman court. But if it's something communal within your crew, they want to give you the flexibility to deal with that the way you want to deal with it, as long as it doesn't seriously conflict with the big stuff. You can't be like, oh, we believe it's okay to murder people, But anything small, like local issues, you guys can deal with that on your own. We want to give you that freedom and flexibility. Spanish America, Republic de Indios, Deputy system we mentioned, right? This is the collection of children from mostly the Balkans, right, Southeastern Europe, by the Ottoman Empire. Those were the kids that would be used to become the Janissaries, right, in the Deputy system. Chinese examination system, you guys know, right? The meritocracy. Salaried samurai. I think this is connected with the idea of self-explanatory. Next one. Well, we can't speak. Samurai were essentially part of the feudal system, right? They were knights, and their role is transitioning into something that is more keeping with this time period, where they have positions of nobility, or the nobles do, but they're kind of now being paid by salaries. Imperial expansion relied on the use of gunpowder. We talked about that a bit. New trading post empire. So trading post empires, I have that for a minute, I think I do. Yes, I do. Beautiful. So trading post empires in the Americas, the colonies that Spain and Portugal and later France and Britain are going to take are going to look similar-ish in shape on a map to the way that the colonies of the Europeans look in Africa and Asia in period 5, right? Where you have big chunks. All of Mexico belongs to Spain. All of this belongs to all of Brazil belongs to Portugal. When it comes to Africa and Asia, though, during period 4, it's dots. It's dots and little squiggles of line of color on a map. We call it trading post empire. Why? Because they don't have
Actual lands, right?
Yeah, but why don't they have actual lands? Because what technologies do they lack? One famous one in particular. We talked about this the other day when we did Kahoot. What do you need to take over all of India or all of Africa? You mentioned it before, actually. What kind? Machine guns, right? Maxim gun. Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not. That's period 5. Period 4, they don't have that. They have muskets. They don't even aim right. So they can't take over all of Africa. They can't take over all of India. They can take over some of the islands in Southeast Asia, particularly with Malacca. The Portuguese and later the Dutch will take over. If you guys remember the video on the VOC from John Green, he talked about some of the really rough exploitation of islands in this region. But they're small islands. The Mughal Empire in India is not going anywhere because you come in with muskets. It's not scary to them. They have gunpowder too, right? Certain parts of Africa, coastal areas will be colonized, but you can't take over all of Africa. China never got conquered, even during the height of imperialism. They had serious influence, but they didn't invade and take over like they did in India. So they don't have the ability to do that, but the point is they have little points, they have little spots that they can trade from, and this was the Indian Ocean Trade Network, and the Indians and the Southeast Asians and the Chinese and the Africans and the Arabs traded with each other, and now the Europeans are just like, excuse me. There's a video I remember of some particular guy like pushing him away to the front of a group, and that's kind of what it makes you think of. You said it. You remember that one? Yeah, I remember here. Right? That's what the Europeans are doing in the Indian Ocean. They're just kind of coming in and squeezing their way in the middle of this and kind of taking the other people's spots. So, don't worry, we'll get the pepper to Southeast Asia. Don't you worry, India, we can do this. And what do they make? No, what do they make from selling the pepper? Money, right? So the trade in here started with the Portuguese, then later the Dutch with the VOC. They're not so concerned about taking pepper and spices and bringing it to Europe. They don't care about that. Yeah, okay, we'll get some spices up there every once in a while. The focus is, it takes a really long time to get back to Europe. I'm not going to waste my time bringing nutmeg to Germany. Who cares? I'll bring nutmeg from Indonesia to India, and I'll take a cut. And then I'll go back to Indonesia and back to India. This is where they live. They just stayed here doing this, back and forth. They just shoved themselves into the Indian Ocean trade. Yeah.
Wasn't the strait that the Dutch possessed that was also very important because it was like the Constantinople or Istanbul because they can control that area.
Absolutely, yeah. And we saw that with the Srivijaya Empire in the same region, Malacca and Batavia. Those two spots right here, those two cities, right on those straits, and the Dutch controlled both of them actually by this point. Originally, the Portuguese came in, but the Dutch just came and shoved them out. They were just more powerful. The Portuguese aren't left with too much in this region. They got left with some spots in Africa. Spain, of course, gets the Philippines, and they'll be also doing shipping from. Spain doesn't have a lot going on in this region, so when they want to get involved in that region, they ship from Mexico to the Philippines, the Manila galleons. So there's trade between Mexico and the Philippines, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mexico actually administered the Philippines. Like rather than having to go all the way back to the King of Spain said, okay, I have my viceroy in Mexico. He's like my representative there. He'll deal with the Philippines, and because it was just too far. And so Philippines was almost like a colony of Mexico, which was a colony of Spain. You know what I mean? And a similar, if I'm not mistaken about that, I think India was the same thing with Myanmar. Myanmar was a colony of India, which was a colony of Britain. Like it was a British colony, but it was ruled not by the British government themselves. It's like, we don't have time for that. Is that India, like the British rulers of India, they were responsible for ruling over Myanmar. I know we're running out of time. I'll try to just zip. Honestly, I know it seems like we have a lot left, but we really don't. Because this is just, hey, what are these empires? And we've already talked about most of this, so I think this is like 3 minutes of conversation. Europeans established trading post empires in Asia and Africa. We just talked about that. Their impact is limited by the local states, including the Shanti and the Mughal empires. The African, like we just said, they can't be able to take over the whole thing. Land empires, Manchu, Mughal, Russian expanded dramatically. We already talked about the Russian. We know about the Ottomans, the Gunpowder Empires, the Mughal Gunpowder Empire, Manchu, right? We talked about that in China coming down from the north. I don't have specific stuff I want to say about that. If you want to go into more detail, you can look at Freemanpedia and elsewhere to get specifics on them. But it's really just talking about the fact that they expanded. The maps on here really cover everything you need to, or the basics of the European states, the maritime empires. You have the Portuguese, which we kind of just touched on, right? The Spanish, the big chunks taken out. The Dutch, with the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, and the British Empire, which eventually became the largest empire, although this map that is on here is obviously, it's a composite map. So it's every piece of empire they ever had, but not all at the same time. So it shows like all of Africa being colonized, but it also includes the 13 colonies and Canada. So it's just kind of like the best of album of the British Empire. Thanks for the laugh on that. 30 Years' War, I'll just mention real quick, because I don't really think that there's much that needs to be said about Pirates in the Caribbean. There were pirates in the Caribbean. As far as review, for learning, you can go into more detail, but I don't really want to say much about that. Ottoman and Safavid, they fought each other. They're right next door. They used the Sunni-Shia difference as a baloney reason why they should fight each other. They're just fighting because they're neighbors, and that's what neighbors do. They have political rivalries, and to justify their fighting, they go, "Oh, we are the better version of Islam." 30 Years' War is the only one I think is worth mentioning, which is really influenced by the Protestant Reformation. We mentioned yesterday that the Protestant Reformation led to extreme amounts of violence, but we often separate them in our minds. 30 Years' War was a really good example of that. The 30 Years' War is also noteworthy because while it started off very much along religious lines, Protestant countries were lining up with Protestants and Catholic countries lining up with Catholics, it very quickly shifted. And it's a good turning point, in my view, of going from, we went from just everything's Catholic. Then after the Protestant Reformation, there was a lot of conflict and conflict like Britain versus Spain with the Spanish Armada and things like that. But this was a turning point where you also see people going, you know what, you're Protestant, I'm Catholic, but man, these Habsburgs, man, I can't stand them. Let's ally against them, even though they're Catholic and I'm Catholic, but you're Protestant. Who cares? Politics is more important than religion, right? So 30 Years' War, very devastating war. Germany really got just awful. That was the one last time we remember, like, wolves were coming back into Germany. We learned at the very end of the year last year. Perhaps it's fleeting from your mind, but a real massive war that is up to the 7 Years' War is probably the next time we have such a big war with all of Europe getting involved and setting the stage for these big international wars in Europe. And we'll go to 7 Years' War, and then eventually, World War I, World War II. Right. I'm going to end it here today, guys. I'm not planning to do review next week. So what I'll do is I have the packet for you guys. I'll provide you with the packet, and you can watch the other videos that are online. Have you guys watched them at all lately, or at all? A little bit. So maybe this is a chance to give them a shot. Mr. Morgan and I wasn't ever planning on doing a period 6 anyway, so I would definitely recommend that. Periods 1 through 4 is my specialty anyway. So I'll give you the packets next week. If you really want them, I can give them to you now, actually. You guys want them?
I'll take them next week.
Okay. Emma's like, I got this. I'm making this happen. And then there's also Freemanpedia and AP Worldpedia. I would just recommend kind of going through those and using this as a point as a reference to say, did I get everything I need? Sound good?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys, especially you two. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here, being so consistent with your attendance. I hope anybody who is watching elsewhere is benefiting as well, and I wish you guys the very best on the AP exam. Just keep studying, keep working, and even if regardless of how you do on the AP exam, this is more valuable for the rest of your life. I'll tell them I said that, but I want you to do well on the AP exam, but I also want you to carry this knowledge with you through the rest of your life, so you can do really well. You want me to? Did I do it right? I gotta do this when I do it. Like, I don't know why I do that.
So quiet is when
It's super quiet. There's no music or anything playing. All right, let's wrap it up. Peace out.